This is the one who came through water and blood, Jesus Christ, not by water alone, but water and blood. The Spirit is the one that testifies, and the Spirit is truth. So there are three that testify: the Spirit, the water, and the blood. And the three are of one accord. We take up the Johannine writings, the Gospel of John, and the three letters of John toward the end of the New Testament. It's a very controversial literature. It doesn't seem to fit with the synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It seems not to fit with Paul's letters, and yet it's an important part of our faith. It tells us things about Christ, about Christ's relationship with the Father, that we wouldn't know otherwise. It came from a different place in the world than most of the rest of the scripture. It probably came from Asia Minor, currently the western coast of Turkey, in the Greek cities of that area, probably around Ephesus, although maybe Antioch as well. John's gospel puts so much emphasis on the Spirit that it's been read as endorsement of something called Gnostic Christianity. I'll take a minute to explain that. Gnostic Christianity, in varied ways, teaches that the Spirit is superior to the flesh, and to some extent the flesh is irrelevant. Gnostic Christianity sees Jesus as a connection to the world beyond, and sees him as a liberation from this world we now inhabit, this bad world of flesh and blood and whatever. For them, the Eucharist doesn't really matter very much, and neither does the Passion. However, Gnostic Christianity died out in antiquity, and even though Gnostic ideas have resurfaced from time to time, they've never gotten much popularity. In fact, they're rather elitists in outlook. It's not possible for them to be widely accepted the way they're presented. One scripture that's used frequently to justify it was, "Many are called, few are chosen." Gnosticism was a faith for the chosen. However, John very subtly says that flesh is important. Blood isn't used very much in John's writings. However, when it does, it's important. It makes a contact. As Father Schreiter points out in the 10th chapter of In Water and in Blood, without flesh, the Spirit cannot take form or get things done. And Father Schreiter says that a spirituality of blood is a spirituality of engagement with flesh and blood, an engagement that will allow the Spirit to appear. Chapter 6 of John's Gospel is the Eucharistic chapter. It begins with the feeding of the multitude, and then Jesus walks on the water, and then in Capernaum, he teaches them about the Eucharist. The Eucharist needs to be understood in the connection with Jesus' passion and death. And in this way, John puts it at a different point in his story than do the Synoptic Gospels. John puts it here rather than at the Last Supper. But Jesus connects himself further with the bread from heaven and the sacrificial lamb of Passover. Father Schreiter says, the Eucharist is more than a memorial to remember Jesus. It becomes a participation in the saving mystery of his death, the saving pathway whereby he opened up the possibility of tasting divine life. Perhaps it was an answer to the Gnostic idea that the Eucharist was crude and unspiritual. It reinforces the intimate relationship between the flesh and the spirit. The Eucharist holds the worlds of the flesh and spirit together, bringing them together from their conflict. The Eucharist is also about nurture. Father Schreiter says it can mean protection from a night of terror. It can mean the vindication of a just cause and an ending of wrath, an invitation to draw near, the breaking down of separating walls, the chance to start over again. Food and drink are about satisfying the basic hungers of human life, and the Eucharist also deals with those hungers, both physical and spiritual, through a concrete tactile encounter with the living God. Father Schreiter says, to receive the Eucharist is to commit oneself to the same things for which the Lord has died, the end of sin and the coming of God's justice. Probably the most vivid image of blood in John's Gospel happens in his Passion account in chapter 19, verse 34, where the soldier pierces the body of the dead Jesus and blood and water flow out. It's a striking image. It's very concrete. It's not a surprise considering what's happened. But the author's meaning here is unclear, and there have been many ideas of what this symbolizes. Blood pouring out is a sign the sacrifice is complete, the redemption is done. It's also a sign that Jesus truly died and wasn't just a spirit. His death was important. The fountain of blood also has Eucharistic overtones. The water in this passage can be a reference to Numbers 20, verse 11, where Moses struck the rock and water poured forth, or Ezekiel 47th chapter, verses 1 to 12, where Ezekiel speaks of a stream that flows down from the temple, enriching all that it touches, making the salt sea fresh when it reaches the Dead Sea. Water is also a very obvious reference to baptism. The first letter of John gives us two important references to the blood of Christ. In chapter 1, verse 7, it reminds us that the work of the blood continues today. It's not stuck in the past. Father Schreiter says, it is a living and moving force within our world, at the frontier where the reign of God is beginning to take shape. It heightens our awareness of both light and darkness and offers us comfort and hope. And finally, the quote I read you at the very beginning of this video, in water and in blood, not only talks about baptism, but suffering. We are part of the suffering of Christ, as we've discussed before in the series. But in water and in blood says that through Jesus' baptism and death, he entered reality in a special way, fighting the Gnostic tendency. It testifies that Jesus was no ghost or spirit. Jesus isn't an idea, but a concrete reality, water and blood. Both water and blood convey the Spirit. The Spirit makes the water and blood do its work. There's more we can say about this chapter of In Water and in Blood, and will be said soon. Next Tuesday, we're going to release a video here at this very same place where we're going to expand on some of the things I talked about here. I'll be joined by a couple of other folks, one person very familiar to you all, and somebody new to us, new to our spirituality. Very excited about this conversation. And you can join the conversation as well. Please feel free to leave comments in the comments section below, or to contact us if you have something more extensive to say, or if you have an insight that you think we need to be aware of. So in the meantime, may God bless you, may God give you peace, and may we all find redemption in the precious blood of Christ.